Hello my fellow Christian fiction lovers, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite historical fictional romances. Historical fiction romance, that's the right word for it. All of these are Christian fiction. I might talk about the faith elements in them a little as I go over them, but just from the get-go, know that they are all Christian fiction because sometimes I forget to mention that. And I don't know why. So a lot of these books I have read within the last 6 or 7 months, some of them within just the last month, and I thought I would do a more updated historical fiction recommendation, specifically if you are looking for romance. So yeah, those are the stipulations for these books. Let's get right into it. The first is a book that I actually just finished yesterday, and that is A Distant Melody by Sarah Sundin. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and for some reason, the longer it sat on my TBR, the more I convinced myself I wasn't going to like it. So I was in for a very nice surprise when I ended up so thoroughly enjoying and just loving this book entirely when I got to read it. I actually read it in 2 days, that's how much I liked it. My brain does weird things, so I'm not even going to attempt to figure out why I thought I wasn't going to like it. This book we follow Allie. She is the first main character, and she comes from a very rich family. She has a boyfriend that her parents basically hand-selected for her. She's expected to marry him. She's expected to act the prototype of a rich daughter, but inwardly she does not want to. It's not that she doesn't want to obey her parents, it's that she wants to obey God first, and she doesn't quite know how to do that. So we start this book following her as she's going to visit her best friend from college and take part in that wedding and like be a bridesmaid, and while she's traveling she meets, what's his name? I just read it and I forgot. She meets Lieutenant Walter Novak, and it ends up that they're traveling on the same train and they are both going to the same place because he's like childhood best friends with Betty and her family. And so she gets to know him a lot that the week she is out there during that wedding, and then they end up deciding to correspond. And Walter is also the other main character. We get a lot of stuff from his perspective too. And basically he falls for Allie very hard when he like originally meets her. He's like crazy for her and is like, this is the woman I'm going to marry. But Allie kind of forgets to mention that she has a boyfriend. So they almost don't end up corresponding because when he finds out, he's completely crushed and gutted. But they do end up writing letters while he's off at war, because this is set during World War II. Forgot to mention that. And via their correspondence, Allie gains a lot of independence and encouragement from him to obey God before she obeys what everybody else expects her to do. It is a love story. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but for those of you who are familiar with Sarah Sundin books, you'll figure out it's minor spoiler, it's a happily ever after. But anyway, that is this book, and I really liked how it was a more easygoing wartime story, but at the same time, the scenes from Walter's perspective, he's a pilot, oh my gosh, so much like the reality of wartime is packed into the scenes that are from his perspective. So I appreciated that it wasn't just all like fluffy romance. There was actual like weight to it, and it didn't gloss over the fact that they were at war. So that is book number 1. Okay, so the second book is The Love Note by Joanna Davidson Politano. I'm gonna go with that pronunciation. But this is the first book I have ever read by this author. Whew, words are hard for me today for some reason, but I really liked it. I gave this book 4 stars. So basically the premise is Willa Duvall wants to become a doctor, but it is 1865 and it is very hard for women to become doctors in the 1860s in Britain. So she convinces her father that instead of marrying like she is expected to, she will go on basically like a little kind of, not internship, but I guess that's what you could call it. She will go and care for one patient until that patient has recovered or basically like met the goal of what they wanted healing for. And so she ends up taking this position at, where is it? At Crestwick Manor. And the reason that she decides to go to Crestwick is because she finds a letter in a desk that had come from that manor, and it is a love note, hence the title of the book, and she wants to get to the bottom of it because there were no names put on the letter, so she wants to find out who wrote it and who it was to. And while she is there, seeking to nurse the lady of the house back to health, she is also on this discovery of trying to figure out who wrote the love note and who it is to, and it gets passed through a lot of different hands, and so many different stories are uncovered. She reunites with her childhood best friend Gabe, and some feelings kind of are introduced that she wasn't necessarily prepared for. But I really liked it. Also, the faith element in this book was just like so much bigger than I thought it was going to be, and all of the characters' faiths get challenged and grow, and I just love to read a love story in which the characters not only love each other, but they love God, and God is at the center of their relationship. It's just so heartwarming and not done enough. It's not done well enough these days, if that makes sense. So anyway, that is The Love Note. Third, we have Engraved on the Heart by Tara Johnson. This book is a Civil War romance, and I read it at the very beginning of the year. So basically this book follows a debutante in the South, Keziah, yes, that's her name. The plot basically gets rolling when she kind of reunites with an old school friend who is now Dr. Micah Grayson as he comes back into her life, and you know, feelings are definitely there on both sides, and neither of them really know what to do with it. Plus, Keziah's family is 100% on the side of the South, whereas Micah is definitely, you know, on the side of the North, but he's living in the South, and so he kind of gets her involved in the Underground Railroad, and there's a lot of like danger and suspense involved in her story. The resolution, I'm trying to remember it all. It was very rushed, and a lot happened in the last few chapters of this book. It was a romance, but it was also a story of Keziah coming out from under the expectations and weight placed upon her by her family, and also realizing that just because her family was on the side of the South does not mean that she has to align herself with them. Like, she's not her family. These books are all having a very similar theme, I'm now realizing. I definitely gravitate towards similar themes. And then finally we have A Reluctant Bride by Jody Hedlund. This is the first book in the Brideships series. It's the only book in the Brideship series that I have read. I've heard that they're not as great after this one. If I ever see it like at a thrift shop or a library, I would pick up the other ones, but I don't think they're ones I'll actively like seek out to buy. But that has nothing to do with this book. So anyway, moving on. This book follows Mercy Wilkins, and she is basically like at the end of her rope in England. Like, she's basically no longer welcome in her home because her family is incredibly poor and they just don't have any more like space for her, and she can't get a job anywhere, so she signs up to go on a bride ship over to British Columbia to become a bride to a waiting groom in British Columbia. And if I'm remembering correctly, she doesn't realize at first that that's what she's signing up for. I think she doesn't realize it until after she's on the ship. But anyway, and then once on the ship, she meets Joseph Colville, who is the ship's surgeon and doctor. It's been a minute since I've read this book. I'm trying to remember everything. I do remember what it's about. But she meets him, and you know, he's taking care of everyone on the ship and making sure they stay healthy. And because it was sea travel back in whenever this book was set, back in the 1860s, you know, there were still a lot of illnesses that were coming about, and not necessarily it wasn't necessarily as smooth sailing as it would be nowadays. But anyway, they form a bond, and she helps him take care of a lot of his patients on the ship, and they just form this connection, and you know, feelings are there. That is A Reluctant Bride, and I did really like their story and how they came together and grew in their faith and grew in all of those things. And yeah, it was a pretty good book. I forget exactly what I gave it. I think if I remember correctly, I gave it like 3.5 stars, something like that. So yeah. Alright, so those are the 4 historical fiction romances I have for you today. I kind of tried to space some of them out a little. You know, we have a World War II romance, a Civil War romance, 2 in the 1860s, but I mean, one took place on a ship and one took place at a manor, so those are a little different settings. But anyway, let me know if you have read any of these books, or if you want to read any of them. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them in the comments. And definitely feel free to recommend any more historical fiction romances that you enjoy. Clearly 4 does not cover them all, but those are just 4 that I have read semi-recently and wanted to share with you guys. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like, and if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, bye!